A moment in a man's life comes which splits his life into two halves. Not a bullet, not a betrayal, not the kind of thing that makes the news. Sometimes it is just a night, one woman, one conversation that he was never supposed to have with the person he was never supposed to notice. And after that night, nothing fits the way it used to. This man controlled an empire. Not the kind they write about in business magazines. The kind they whisper about in back rooms and closed courts. The kind that makes politicians return phone calls at 3 in the morning. He had built himself into something no one could touch. No one could read. No one could reach. And then she reached him. Not with force. Not with a plan. She reached him by doing something no one in his entire life had ever done. She looked at him, and she did not look away. His name is Sion. Before that night, he was the most powerful man in Seoul's underworld. Controlled, calculated, cold. After that night, he became something else. Before that night, men feared what he could do. After that night, men feared what he had become. Because a man who operates on discipline can be predicted. A man who operates on strategy can be outmaneuvered. But a man who has been cracked open, a man who has tasted something real and watched it vanish before morning, that man does not follow rules anymore. That man does not negotiate. That man does not stop. He became the most feared man alive. And it all started with a maid, a woman no one was supposed to see, a woman who was supposed to clean and leave and disappear, a woman named Lena. This is their story. And if you think you know how it ends, you do not. Seoul has a heartbeat that most people never hear. Beneath the neon, beneath the glass towers and the traffic and the tourists taking photographs of palaces, there is another city. A city that runs on silence and debt, and the understanding that certain names are never spoken carelessly. Sion's name was one of those names. His father had built the organization from nothing, a construction magnate on paper. A man who controlled ports, contracts, and entire districts of Seoul's economy in reality. The elder Sion had been ruthless, but political. He shook hands in public and broke fingers in private. He understood the game because he had invented most of its rules. When he died 4 years ago, the empire did not pause. It did not mourn. It simply looked up and saw his son standing in the doorway, wearing his father's ring and his father's silence. And the empire decided to wait, to watch, to test. Sion passed every test, not with his father's charm, not with alliances or compromise. He passed them by being the one person in every room who needed nothing from anyone. He did not ask for loyalty. He made disloyalty so expensive that loyalty became the only rational choice. Within 2 years, the organization under Sion was tighter, leaner, and more feared than it had ever been under his father. The politicians still returned phone calls at 3 in the morning. The port authorities still looked the other way. But now there was something different in the air when his name came up in conversation. Under his father, men respected the organization. Under Sion, men feared the man. But Director Shin saw what no one else was willing to say out loud. That the fear was a performance. That Sion had memorized the choreography of power so perfectly that no one noticed it was rehearsed. Shin had been the operational backbone of the syndicate for 2 decades. He had built the systems, managed the logistics, cleaned the messes. And every single day, he watched a man who inherited a throne sit on it like he had built it with his own hands. Shin never said it directly. He never challenged Sion openly. That was not his method. Shin operated like water finding cracks in a wall. Patient, quiet, relentless. He placed questions where certainties used to be. He offered alternatives that made Sion's decisions look rigid. He praised Sion publicly with words that carried the faintest scent of something that was not quite praise. And Sion knew. He always knew. But knowing that someone is maneuvering against you and knowing what to do about it are 2 very different things. Because Shin was not wrong. The performance was real. The control was rehearsed. And somewhere beneath the suits and the silence and the silver ring, Sion understood that he was operating a machine he had never actually built. He just was not ready to admit what that meant. And then there was his mother. Madam Park did not run the syndicate. She would never use that word. What she ran was the architecture around it, the household, the appearances, the invisible web of social expectation that kept the family name synonymous with untouchable respectability. She had spent 40 years building that architecture, and she maintained it the way a surgeon maintains a sterile field. Nothing unplanned entered. Nothing undisciplined survived. She loved her son, in the way that a woman who sacrificed her own humanity for an empire loves the thing that empire was built for. She loved him by controlling him. She loved him by removing anything that could make him soft. She loved him by ensuring that the machine she had helped build never encountered a variable it could not process. Lena was about to become that variable. She arrived on a Tuesday. No one remembers which one. The agency sent 4 new housekeeper candidates that month. 3 of them were Korean women in their 40s with experience in luxury households. The 4th was a tall, dark-skinned East African woman in her late 20s who spoke Korean with a careful, practiced accent and English with a fluency that suggested education far above the job she was applying for. Lena did not choose Seoul. Seoul was what was left after everything else fell apart. Now I want you to hear me carefully when I tell you this. This is important. She was not a woman who had always been poor. She was not a woman who had always served. Lena had been an accountant in Nairobi. She had worn pressed blouses and carried a briefcase and taken taxis to an office on the 14th floor of a building with glass doors. She had a life, a real one, with plans and a future, and a man she believed in. That man was Daniel, and Daniel had taken everything, not all at once. That is not how those men work, is it? They take piece by piece. First your trust, then your money, then your documents, then your options. And by the time you realize what has happened, the floor you are standing on is already gone, and you are falling, and the only question left is where you land. Lena landed in Seoul. She landed in a language she had taught herself from textbooks and television. She landed in a country where her skin color made her visible in exactly the ways she needed to be invisible. And she landed in a job that required her to clean the private spaces of people who would never look at her face. If you are watching this from a country where you know what it means to rebuild yourself in a place that was never designed for you, drop your location in the comments right now. Because what Lena carried with her into that house is something that cannot be faked. It is the quiet, unbreakable refusal to let circumstance define identity. The other staff learned quickly that Lena was not social. She was not rude. She greeted people. She followed instructions. She completed her work with a thoroughness that surprised the head housekeeper. But she did not share meals in the kitchen with the others. She did not gossip. She did not complain. She watched. She watched the way the household operated like a machine designed to serve one man. She watched the staff lower their eyes when Sion's footsteps echoed in the corridor. She watched the way Director Shin moved through the estate like he owned it, and Madam Park moved through it like she had designed it. And when Sion himself walked past her one morning in the East Corridor, close enough that she could smell the cedar and tobacco on his suit jacket, she did something that no one on his staff had done in 4 years. She looked up, not with challenge, not with flirtation, not with the manufactured deference that every other person in the estate performed like muscle memory. She looked up with simple, unhurried human acknowledgement, the way one person looks at another person. Nothing more, nothing less. Sion did not stop walking. His stride did not change. His expression did not shift, but his eyes moved. For exactly 1 second, his eyes moved to hers. And in that second, something registered in a part of his brain that had been locked shut for years. Not attraction, not curiosity, something more dangerous. Recognition. The feeling of being seen by someone who is not performing the act of seeing. He kept walking. He did not look back. And if you had asked him that evening what had happened in the East Corridor, he would have said nothing. But nothing had already started to become something. The next 3 weeks moved the way pressure moves through deep water. Slow on the surface, crushing underneath. Director Shin began making moves. Quiet ones. The kind that do not look like moves until you realize 3 months later that every piece on the board has shifted 2 squares. He met with 2 of the syndicate's regional lieutenants without informing Sion. He adjusted shipping schedules through the port. He redirected a line of revenue that Sion would not notice, missing for at least 60 days. None of this was open rebellion. That was not Shin's language. This was architecture. He was building an alternative structure inside the existing one, the way termites build inside walls. And by the time the wall collapses, the new structure is already standing. Sion sensed it. He had always been able to feel shifts in loyalty the way some people feel changes in weather. A conversation that ended too quickly. A phone call that went to voicemail when it never used to. A meeting where the energy in the room had a different frequency, but he could not name it. And a threat you cannot name is a threat you cannot answer. And during those same 3 weeks, Lena kept appearing at the edges of his vision. Not deliberately. She was doing her job. Cleaning. Organizing. Moving through the estate the way she always did, with that upright posture and those steady eyes that asked for nothing. But Sion began to notice her the way a man with a headache notices silence. She was the only still point in a house full of performance. There was a moment. A small one. But the small ones are always the ones that matter, are they not? Sion came home one evening after a meeting that had gone wrong. He walked into the study and found Lena arranging books on the shelf. She had not heard him enter. She was holding a book of Korean poetry open in her hands, reading it. Actually reading it. Not cleaning it. Not dusting it. Reading it with the quiet absorption of a person who understands words and has missed them. When she sensed him and looked up, she did not drop the book. She did not apologize. She did not perform the flustered guilt that a maid is supposed to perform when caught doing something outside her role. She simply closed the book and placed it back on the shelf and said, in her careful Korean, "It is a beautiful collection." And Sion, who had entered the room carrying the weight of a fracturing empire, heard himself respond, "Which poem?" It was not a question he had planned to ask. It was not a strategic move. It came from somewhere beneath the performance, from the version of himself that used to read those books before his father decided that poetry was a weakness. Lena looked at him for a moment. Then she said the name of the poem, and it was the one he had loved most when he was 17 years old. Before the ring, before the empire, before the silence became permanent. He said nothing after that. She returned to her work. He stood in the doorway for 4 more seconds than he should have. And then he left. But the crack was there now. Hairline thin. Invisible to anyone watching from the outside. But structural. Tell me something. When someone you barely know accidentally touches the one part of you that you have protected your entire life, do you move toward them or do you run? Drop your answer in the comments because Sion is about to spend the next 2 weeks pretending the answer does not matter. And it is going to cost him everything. The confrontation came on a Thursday night. Director Shin had orchestrated it the way a conductor orchestrates a crescendo. Slowly, precisely, building each instrument until the sound could no longer be ignored. He brought numbers. Revenue reports that showed inefficiencies in Sion's recent decisions. Port schedules that suggested mismanagement. Personnel assignments that Shin had quietly improved without authorization, presented now as evidence that the organization needed a different hand on the wheel. He never used the word replace. He did not need to. The numbers said it. 3 of the 6 men seated at the table looked at Shin when he spoke instead of looking at Sion. That was the real message. Not the reports. Not the data. The eyes. 3 out of 6 had already made their calculation. Sion listened to everything. He did not interrupt. He did not react. When Shin finished, and the room waited for the response that would determine which direction the next 6 months would go, Sion looked at Shin for 7 seconds, without speaking. Then he said 5 words. "Is that everything, Director?" Not a question. A measurement. The room heard it for what it was. Shin had shown his hand. And now Sion knew exactly which 3 men at that table had decided he was replaceable. But here's the part that Shin did not understand. And this is critical. Sion left that room knowing his empire was fracturing, and instead of feeling fury, instead of feeling the cold strategic urgency that should have driven him to make calls and move pieces and shore up alliances through the night, he felt something he had not expected. Relief. Relief that the pretending was almost over. Relief that someone had finally said out loud what he had been feeling in silence for months. That the machine was running him. That the empire his father built was a suit he had never been fitted for. That the most powerful man in Seoul's underworld was tired. Not physically, not strategically, existentially tired. He drove back to the estate. He dismissed the driver at the gate and walked the rest of the gravel path alone. The house was dark except for one light. The kitchen. She was making tea. That is the detail that will stay with him for the rest of his life. Not what she was wearing. Not the way the light hit her skin. The fact that she was making tea at 11:40 at night in a kitchen that did not belong to her, with the calm, unhurried movements of a woman who had decided that this small act of normalcy was something she was going to give herself regardless of where she was or what her title said she was allowed to do. Sion stood in the doorway for 10 seconds before she noticed him. And in those 10 seconds, something happened that he did not have language for. He watched a woman who had no idea she was being observed simply be herself. No performance.
No adjustment.
No mask snapping into place. Just a woman, making tea, existing without apology. When she turned and saw him, she did not startle. She looked at him. Then she looked at his face. Not at his suit. Not at his posture. At his face. At the thing that was breaking behind his eyes that he thought he was hiding. And she said, "You look like a man who has had a long night." Not sir. Not Mr. Sion. Not the careful formality of a housekeeper addressing her employer. She spoke to him the way a human being speaks to another human being who is clearly not okay. He should have walked away. Every rule in his world said walk away. Every lesson his mother had taught him said that vulnerability in front of a subordinate is the first domino in a collapse. Every instinct that had kept him alive in the underworld said that this woman, this moment, this kitchen at midnight was a variable that could not be controlled and therefore must be avoided. He sat down. He sat down at the kitchen table and she placed a second mug of tea in front of him without asking if he wanted one. And for the first time in his adult life, Sion did not calculate what to say next. He did not run the sentence through the filter of strategy and image and consequence. He just spoke. He told her the meeting had gone badly. He did not say what the meeting was about. He did not mention the syndicate or Shin or the numbers or the 3 men whose eyes had shifted. He simply said that something he had been holding together for a long time was starting to come apart. And he did not know if he wanted to keep holding it. Lena listened. She did not offer advice. She did not rush to fill the silence. She listened the way only someone who has experienced real loss can listen. With patience. With the understanding that sometimes a person is not looking for an answer. They're looking for a witness. And then she said something that went through him like a knife. The hardest thing I ever did was stop pretending I was okay. Because once you stop, you cannot start again. You see things too clearly. And the world does not like people who see clearly. She said it casually, like she was describing the weather. But her eyes were not casual. Her eyes were the eyes of a woman who had lived every syllable of that sentence. Sion looked at her, not at the uniform, not at the housekeeper, at her, at the person behind the composure. And what he saw was a mirror, a woman who had constructed an armor of stillness to survive a world that had tried to break her. The same armor he wore, the same silence, the same rehearsed calm, except hers was real. And his was a performance. And in the recognition of that difference, something inside him that had been locked for 20 years came undone. What happened next did not begin with a touch. It began with silence. A long silence where they both sat at that table and neither of them performed. Neither of them managed the moment. They simply existed in the same space without armor, and the gravity of that nakedness, emotional nakedness, pulled them toward each other the way only honesty can. That night was not romance. It was not seduction. It was not a powerful man taking advantage of a woman beneath his station. It was two people who had been drowning for years suddenly realizing they could breathe in the same room. And by morning, everything was different. He woke up and she was gone. Not gone from the bed, gone from the estate, gone from the staff registry, gone from the agency's active file. Her room in the staff quarters had been cleaned and reassigned. Her uniform had been collected. Her name had been removed from the weekly schedule. Lena had not left. Lena had been removed. And Sion knew exactly who had done it. Madame Park was seated in her sitting room when he found her. Tea in her hands. Posture perfect. Face composed with the serene authority of a woman who has already anticipated every word her son is about to say and has prepared her responses the way a general prepares for a battle she has already won. The agency was contacted this morning, she said before he could speak. The girl has been reassigned. There is nothing to discuss. The girl, not her name, not even the dignity of a noun that acknowledged her as a specific person. The girl, a variable, an error, something to be cleaned up like a spill on the polished floor. Sion looked at his mother, and for the first time in his life, he did not see the matriarch. He did not see the protector. He saw a warden, a woman who had spent her entire life building a prison of perfection and calling it love. He did not shout. Sion never shouts. But what he said next came from the version of himself that Lena had uncovered the night before. The honest version. The version without the filter. You do not get to decide who exists in my life. Not anymore. Madame Park's teacup did not move. Her expression did not change. But something shifted behind her eyes. A flicker. Not fear. Recognition. She recognized that something in her son had changed overnight, and she did not know what it was. And for a woman who had spent 40 years knowing everything, that uncertainty was the most dangerous thing in the room. If you are watching this right now and your blood is starting to heat up, if you feel something rising in your chest about what Madame Park just did, I need you to understand that you are exactly where the story needs you to be. Because what Sion does next is going to be fueled by the same thing you are feeling right now. He left the sitting room without another word. He walked to his office. He closed the door. He sat behind his desk. And then he began making phone calls. Not the kind of phone calls a son makes after an argument with his mother. The kind of phone calls that make the ground shift beneath an empire. The calls lasted 3 hours. By morning, two things had happened. First, the 3 men who had looked at Shin during the conference room meeting were no longer part of the organization. Not removed. Not reassigned. Erased from the operational structure so completely that by noon the next day, their names produced blank stares from people who had worked beside them for years. Second, Director Shin received a visitor at his home at 6 in the morning. A man he did not know, carrying an envelope he did not want to open, containing information about Shin's private financial arrangements that Shin had believed were untraceable. The message was not written down. It did not need to be. The message was the visit itself. I know. I have always known. And now you know that I know. Shin sat in his kitchen for 40 minutes after the visitor left. He did not make a single phone call. For the first time in 20 years, Director Shin had no move to make. The underworld noticed. Within a week, the word had spread through the channels that never appear in any official communication. Something had changed in the organization. Something had changed in Sion. The man who had been calculated was now unpredictable. The man who had been strategic was now direct. The man who had played by the rules had stopped playing. And when a man who controls that much power stops playing by the rules, the world does not negotiate. The world steps back. But Sion was not finished. The power moves, the restructuring, the dismantling of Shin's influence. All of that was the surface. Beneath it, moving like a current under ice, was something else entirely. He was looking for her. Not publicly. Not through the channels he used for syndicate business. He used one man. A person he had known since childhood. Someone who did not ask questions because he understood that the nature of the question was the answer. Find her. 2 words. No context.
No explanation.
The man looked at Sion's face and understood that this was not an order from a boss. This was a request from a man standing at the edge of something he could not name. It took 11 days. 11 days during which Sion continued to operate the syndicate with a ferocity that remade the organization from the inside. He cut alliances that had been in place since his father's era. He restructured the financial operations in ways that gave him direct control over streams of revenue that had previously been managed by committees. He met with people his father had considered too dangerous to engage and walked out of those meetings with agreements that doubled the syndicate's reach in Busan and Incheon. The men around him did not understand what had happened. They saw the results. They felt the shift, but they could not identify the cause. And that confusion was itself a weapon. Because when people cannot explain why a man has changed, they fill the gap with fear. They imagine the worst possible explanation. And the worst possible explanation is always more frightening than the truth. The truth was simple. Sion had met a woman who showed him what honesty looked like. And the honest version of Sion was not softer. It was sharper. It was a blade that had been wrapped in silk for 38 years and was now unwrapped and catching the light for the first time. On the 11th day, his man called. Found her. Lena was living in a single room in a district called Mully, a neighborhood of old factories and artist studios and small rooms rented by people who need to disappear for a while. She was working 2 jobs. A cleaning service during the day, a convenience store at night. She had no phone registered to her name. She had not contacted the agency. She had not contacted anyone. She had simply vanished into the seams of the city, the way a woman who has practiced disappearing knows how to do. Sion did not send anyone to bring her back. He did not send a message. He did not call. He went himself. The building was 6 stories of gray concrete with narrow windows and a metal entrance door that did not lock properly. The kind of building that exists in every city in the world, where people go when they need the world to forget they exist. Sion stood outside that door at 9 in the evening wearing a suit that cost more than the entire building's monthly rent. And for the first time in recent memory, he hesitated. He climbed 4 flights of concrete stairs. He stood in front of a door that had a number on it and nothing else. He knocked. The door opened. And Lena looked at him with an expression that broke 3 rules of this story at once. She was not surprised. She was not afraid. She was not happy to see him. She was disappointed. "You should not be here," she said. Not a plea. Not a warning. A diagnosis. The way a doctor tells you a fact about your condition that you already know but have been avoiding. Sion looked at her. And in that moment, standing in a concrete hallway under bad lighting, wearing a suit that screamed power in a building that whispered survival, he understood something about himself that all the boardrooms and back rooms and midnight phone calls had never taught him. He had not come here to find her. He had come here to find the version of himself that only existed when she was in the room. "I know," he said. She did not move from the doorway. She studied his face the way she had studied it that night in the kitchen. Without hurry, without performance, with the same devastating clarity that had cracked him open the first time.
"What do you want?" she said.
And Sion, the man who always knew what to say, the man who could silence a room with 5 words, the man whose voice had been a weapon his entire adult life, said the truest thing he had ever spoken. "I want to know if that night was real, or if I invented it because I needed it to be." Lena looked at him, and for the first time in this story, her armor cracked too. Not the composure, not the discipline, the armor beneath the armor. The one that said she was better off alone. The one that said wanting to be seen was the most dangerous thing a woman in her position could do.
"It was real," she said.
"That is why I left." She stepped aside. He walked in. The door closed. And inside that small room, in a district that nobody powerful ever visits, under a single lamp that barely lit the corners, two people who had no business being in the same world sat down across from each other and began the hardest conversation either of them had ever had. She told him why she came to Seoul. She told him about Daniel, not the details, not the full story, but enough. Enough for him to understand that she had trusted once before, and the cost had been everything. She told him that when she left his estate before dawn, it was not because the night meant nothing. It was because it meant too much. And she had learned, at a price he could not imagine, that the things that mean the most are the things that destroy you the fastest. And then she told him something that restructured his entire understanding of that night. She told him that she had not stayed because he was powerful. She had stayed because in the kitchen, when the mask fell and the real man surfaced, what she saw was not strength. What she saw was a boy who had never been allowed to cry. And that was the moment she knew she needed to leave. Because she recognized him. She recognized the wound. And the last time she recognized someone's wound and tried to heal it, it nearly killed her. Before you tell me what you think is going to happen next, drop your prediction in the comments right now. Because I promise you, what comes next is not what you think it is. While Sion sat in that room in Mully learning the shape of the woman who had changed him, Director Shin was not sitting still. A wounded animal is not a defeated animal. A wounded animal is the most dangerous version of itself. Shin had spent the days since his humiliation doing what he did best.
Digging.
Sion's sudden transformation, the overnight shift from calculated leader to unpredictable force, had a cause. And causes can be exploited. It took Shin's people 5 days to trace the timeline. The new housekeeper, her sudden removal, Sion's confrontation with his mother, the change in behavior that started the very next morning. A woman. Shin almost laughed when the report came in. The great Sion, the untouchable heir, the most feared man in Seoul's underworld. Undone by a maid, a foreign maid, a black African woman who cleaned his floors and apparently cleaned something else that left him rewired. But Shin was not interested in mockery. He was interested in leverage. And leverage requires information. Who was this woman? Where did she come from? What was she hiding? The answer came in the form of a name. Daniel. Shin found Daniel through the agency records and traced backward through Lena's immigration documents. Daniel was listed as a former business partner on documents that predated Lena's arrival in Korea. A few calls to Nairobi produced the rest of the story. Daniel and Lena had been together. They had run a business. The business had collapsed under circumstances that involved missing funds and falsified contracts. Lena had been left with nothing. Daniel had walked away with enough to restart somewhere else. And now, Daniel was very interested in knowing that Lena had found herself in the orbit of a Korean crime lord. Shin made the call himself. He did not use intermediaries. Some conversations require a personal touch. There is a woman here, Shin said. I believe you know her. And I believe she has become a significant problem for a very powerful man. I think you and I can help each other. Daniel was on a plane within 48 hours. Now here is what I need you to understand about what is happening. Shin is not trying to hurt Lena. Shin does not care about Lena. Lena is a tool, a pressure point, a way to demonstrate to the men who follow Sion that their leader has a weakness. And in the world these men live in, weakness is not a personal failing. It is a security breach. It is an invitation for every rival, every enemy, every ambitious lieutenant to calculate new odds. Shin is not trying to destroy Sion with a woman. He is trying to prove that Sion has already destroyed himself. And Daniel is the evidence. The next 72 hours moved like a detonation in slow motion. Shin arranged a meeting with 3 of the syndicate's most senior investors. Not members, investors. The men who funded the operations that Sion's father had built and that Sion now commanded. These were men who did not attend meetings at dark tables. They attended meetings in private dining rooms of hotels that did not officially exist. And Shin came prepared. He brought Daniel. Not physically. Not yet. He brought Daniel's story. The documents. The records from Nairobi. The narrative of a woman who had arrived in Korea under circumstances that, when framed correctly, suggested instability, unpredictability, the kind of background that raises questions about anyone associated with her. But the real weapon was not Lena's past. The real weapon was what Shin said next. Sion has restructured the organization's operations, removed 3 senior members, and renegotiated territorial agreements in Busan and Incheon. All of this in the span of 3 weeks. All of this triggered by a personal attachment to a foreign domestic worker with a compromised background. He let the sentence land. The question is not whether Sion is effective. The question is whether his effectiveness is now driven by strategy or by emotion. And if it is emotion, then every decision he has made in the past 3 weeks must be re-examined. The investors did not speak. They did not need to. Shin could see the calculation behind their eyes. Not doubt about Sion's results. Doubt about Sion's judgment. And in this world, judgment is everything. A man who makes the right moves for the wrong reasons is more dangerous than a man who makes wrong moves for the right ones. One of the investors had a man who owed Sion a debt older than the current crisis. That man made a single phone call, and that phone call reached Sion at 11 at night in Lena's apartment. He listened for 90 seconds. His face changed 3 times. Softness to focus. Focus to fury. Fury to something beyond fury. The cold, still, absolute clarity of a man who now sees the entire board and knows that every piece must move in the next 12 hours, or everything collapses. He hung up. Lena watched him from across the room. She had seen that face before. Not on Sion. On Daniel. The face of a man whose world is calling him back from the one place he actually wants to be.
Go, she said.
Not angry. Not hurt. Not the performance of noble sacrifice. She said it the way a woman who understands power says it, with the full knowledge of what it costs, and the full knowledge that staying would cost more. Sion looked at her, and this is the moment. This is the moment where the man he was before that night would have walked out the door and handled the crisis and never come back. Because that is what the old Sion did. He compartmentalized. He sealed things off. He operated. But the new Sion, the honest Sion, the Sion who had been cracked open in a kitchen and put back together in a way that did not fit the old shape. That Sion did something different. He said, "I am coming back." 3 words, not a promise, a fact. The way he stated business arrangements that were not open to negotiation. Lena did not respond, but her eyes did. He walked out into the night. He got into the car. And for the next 8 hours, the most feared man in Seoul's underworld went to war. Not the kind of war that involves weapons. The kind that involves information, leverage, loyalty, and the willingness to look a man in the eye and make him understand that there is no version of tomorrow that he controls. Sion did not go after Shin. That is what everyone expected. That is what Shin had prepared for. Defensive positions. Contingency plans. Escape routes. Shin had spent a career studying Sion, and he had modeled the response he expected. Direct. Aggressive. Personal. But the man Shin had modeled no longer existed. Sion went to the investors directly. Before dawn. Before Shin could even learn that his play had been exposed. Sion sat in the same room where Shin had made his case, and he did something that no leader in the syndicate's history had ever done. He told the truth. Not about Lena, not about the night. He told the truth about the organization. He laid out every structural weakness his father had left behind, every compromised relationship, every outdated alliance that was costing more than it produced. He showed them the books, not the clean books, the real ones. And then he showed them what he had done in the past 3 weeks and why. Director Shin told you my judgment is compromised, Sion said. He is wrong. My judgment was compromised for 4 years. I was running my father's organization using my father's methods in a world my father did not build. 3 weeks ago, I stopped. Everything I have done since then has increased revenue by 43% and reduced exposure across every vulnerable operation. He paused. Shin is not wrong that something changed in me. He is wrong about what it means. The investors looked at the numbers. Numbers do not lie. And the numbers said that whatever had happened to Sion, the result was not weakness. The result was a man operating at a level he had never reached before. By 9 that morning, the investors had made their decision. Shin was done. Not violently, not dramatically, simply structurally. His access was revoked. His operational authority was transferred. His name was removed from every communication channel in the organization. Not with a bang, with a silence. The most devastating sound in any organization is the sound of a phone that stops ringing. And Daniel, who had flown to Seoul expecting to leverage a woman's past into a payday, found himself standing in the lobby of a hotel with a revoked room key and a text message from Shin that said only 2 words. It is over. If you have been watching the story from the beginning and you stayed through every twist and every turn and every moment where you were not sure which direction this was going, you need to do something for me right now. Hit that subscribe button. Not because I am asking, because you already know you need to see what happens next. And what happens next is going to change everything you think you understand about these 2 people. Go ahead.
Subscribe.
I will wait.
Sion went back.
He said he would. And the new Sion does not say things he does not mean. He knocked on her door at 10 in the morning. She opened it. She looked at him. She looked at his wrinkled suit and his tired eyes and the calm on his face that was different from every version of calm she had seen on him before. Is it done? She asked. The part that needed to be done tonight is done. She looked at him for a long time. And then she said the thing that reframes this entire story. The thing that turns everything you watched into something different than what you thought it was. She said, that night in the kitchen, I did not stay because I felt sorry for you. I stayed because when you sat down and stopped pretending, you were the first honest person I had met since I left home. And I missed honesty more than I missed anything. That is what changed him. Not her body, not the night, not the physical act that every person watching this video assumed was the turning point. It was her honesty. It was the experience of being in a room with a person who did not want anything from him except for him to be real. And for a man who had spent his entire life being a performance, that single experience of being real was so powerful, so addictive, so fundamentally restructuring that it rewired the way he operated in every arena of his life. She did not make him powerful. She made him honest. And honesty, in a world built on lies, is the most terrifying weapon that exists. If this story moves something inside you, share this video with one person. Not for me. Because somewhere out there is somebody who needs to hear that the thing that makes you the most powerful version of yourself is not strategy. It is not ambition. It is the courage to stop pretending. Sion went back to his empire that morning. And the men who watched him walk into the building said afterward that he looked different. Not harder, not softer, just different. Like a man who had been wearing a mask for so long that when he finally took it off, the face beneath it was someone nobody recognized. And that face was more frightening than the mask had ever been. Within 6 months, every syndicate in Seoul had recalculated their position relative to Sion's organization. Within a year, his name was not just known in Korea. It was known in places where names like his are spoken in whispers and measured in consequences. He became the most feared man alive, not because of what he did,
because of what he stopped doing.
He stopped performing. He stopped calculating. He stopped managing perceptions. He started being real. And a real man with that much power is something the world has no defense against. But this story is not over. Because Daniel did not go home. Daniel stayed in Seoul. And what Daniel knows about Lena is not just a weapon that Shin tried to use. It is a truth that Lena herself has not yet told Sion. A truth that, when it surfaces, will test whether the honesty that built this new version of Sion can survive the one lie that Lena has been carrying since the night she arrived in Korea. And Madam Park, who has been silent since her son walked out of her sitting room. Madam Park, who never makes a move without knowing exactly what it will cost and exactly what it will produce. Madam Park has not been idle. She has been waiting, because Madam Park understands something that neither Sion nor Shin nor Daniel have figured out yet. The most dangerous thing in the world is not a man who has been set free. It is the thing that set him free. And Madam Park has never let a dangerous thing exist inside her architecture for long. Now let me ask you this. Do you think Lena is safe? Do you think Sion can protect her? Do you think the woman who changed the most feared man alive can survive the world she changed him in? Part 2 is coming. And if you thought the story was intense, you have not seen anything yet. Subscribe right now so you do not miss it. Turn on that notification bell, because when part 2 drops, you are going to want to be the first one here. I will see you there.